The gospel that we are getting is the conclusion of the 11th chapter of John. And the whole chapter of John is all about Martha and Mary and Lazarus' resurrection, or Lazarus coming out from the tomb. And what I find truly beautiful about this is how the church invites us to go into Holy Week. And I can't help but to think of my main man, Caravaggio, who's my favorite painter in the whole world. He painted in the early 1600s, about 100 years after Michelangelo's Pietà. And also Michelangelo's brilliant Sistine Chapel, where he has God the Father and Adam in that E.T. moment. I hate to use E.T. and Michelangelo in the same sentence, but sometimes it's easier to understand that power of God's finger of life being drawn into the death or the lifelessness of Adam. Now, for me to understand this, so if you look up here, you'll see this is a painting by Caravaggio, and it's called The Raising of Lazarus. And for me, the question as you look at it is, what smells bad in our life that we need Jesus to purify? They were worried about the smell, because for 4 days, the body of Lazarus, which we can see in the center, was going to smell bad. Isn't that funny? Like, Jesus, the Son of God, is going to raise somebody from the dead, and they're worried about dirty clothes not going to the laundry. Isn't that part of how we are? We get fixated on things that Jesus is like, really, guys? You're worried about a smell, and I'm going to raise this guy from the dead? Like, what are the bad smells in our life? The things that stink, that Jesus can just come in at any moment and boom, transform them. But we get so fixated. Well, you don't understand. I have people coming over and my house smells like fish. Okay, get over it. You know, or maybe you haven't done something and you're just like, this stinks. Okay, well, let Jesus in there. Anyway, that's not what Caravaggio was thinking, I don't think, as he was painting this. But I do know this. Jesus gives us the interpretation into this whole 11th chapter early on, in the 4th verse of the 11th chapter, when the conversation goes back and forth with the dear sisters, Martha and Mary, who are pictured to the right. Obviously, Mary cuddling the head of her brother Lazarus as he's now raised from the dead, and Martha behind. And so they see the two sisters beholding their brother. And we know how much we hear in the Gospels constantly that this was Jesus' faith-sharing group. He loved these three. He would go up there and faith share. They would read the old scriptures together and share their lives together. So they understood. I mean, if you read this gospel passage, Martha and Mary knew what was going on here. Yes, they were worried about the smell, but they also had the faith. And in fact, Martha, they both give these amazing testimonies, like if you were here, and then that I believe in the resurrection. And it's a gospel that just truly shows the faith of this faith-sharing group and how we all need to be on fire in faith-sharing groups. But at any rate, the attention is obviously drawn in this painting to this body that's stiff. One hand seemingly grasping the ground, which is like where this skull and bones and it looks like an old candlestick is. Who knows why there'd be a candlestick there? You can see the draperies of his body, like the linens that would have wrapped his body, and that's what was stinking the most. And then his right hand. You see that right hand of Lazarus? It's like reaching out, and then it's reaching out to what? You see on the left is this character standing. I think he's wearing blue and red. That's Jesus. And if you can get close to this, it's hard to see it on the screen. The finger of Jesus is the exact finger in the call of St. Matthew, except Jesus was on the other side. It's so amazing. Anybody who knows Caravaggio knows that his greatest painting of all time was the call of St. Matthew, which is my favorite painting of all time. And now what they have is he puts Jesus on the other side. Jesus in the call of St. Matthew is on the right side of the painting. Here he's on the left, and his profile's from the other side. But his finger's doing the same thing. Obviously influenced by Michelangelo, influenced by the scriptures, would talk about the finger of God drawing and bringing this great power of his divine life and life out and projecting it on the world around him. And what's so beautiful about this is what Caravaggio truly did in an amazing way, and which I relate the most to, is that the drama of all this is in a dark setting. Like, it's not just bad lighting on this that's hard. He starts with a dark background. He paints this black, and it's from the black that emerges the light. And if you notice, the light's actually not emerging directly from Jesus. It's from behind Jesus. It's as if there's this Trinitarian light, the Spirit and the Father, that work through Jesus, and especially through his finger, that come and then point directly onto the stench and the smelly body. I guarantee you, Martha and Mary were not worried about giving him a bath right away, more than just knowing that he wasn't dead anymore. And the mere shock of seeing their brother, who had been dead 4 days ago, was now alive. And the stench, despite it perhaps being there, would easily fade with the recognition that their brother was alive. And this is the moment that he's drawn out of the tomb, and they get to embrace this incredible power of God coming from heaven in the power of Jesus Christ, raising from the dead dear Lazarus. And so this fourth verse of chapter 11 is, I believe, how Jesus wants us to interpret this whole thing. Because when the sisters come to him, Jesus knows what he's going to do. He'd already heard that he had died. Jesus already knew. And so what is Jesus' reaction? He says about Lazarus' sickness, "This sickness will end, not in death, but in God's glory. And through it, the Son of God will be glorified." So I just want you to sit with that scripture and look at this one more time. Jesus gives us the way to interpret this 11th chapter of John, in other words, the raising of Lazarus, with this very beautiful verse. Jesus says, "This sickness will end." What are the sicknesses in our life that will end? And they won't end in death, even if we have loved ones who have died. But Jesus goes on, but in God's glory, and through it, the Son of God will be glorified. Let's take a moment and just look at this and place into the body of Lazarus all those stinky things in our life, whether it be in the past, the present, or what we're worried about in the future. Perhaps it's a loved one who's died. Perhaps it's something that we're struggling with now. Where are we being tied down by the stench of death, the devil, sin? And we need to be released with light, love, and the power of God. So Jesus brings not deodorant into the stenchy moment, but he brings his divine power. And it's through his human nature that his divine nature works the power. And that's what we need to do. Bring our stenchy, smelly human nature into the presence of God's divine nature so that it could be transformed. One of the reasons why I love this painting so much is this is like the grand finale of Caravaggio. It's one of his last paintings. Caravaggio only lived to be 39, and he lived this dark existence. Every once in a while, he'd come out of the light with these incredible paintings. He killed 2 people. The whole world wanted to kill him. The Pope had a vendetta against him and then had forgiven him. It was a back and forth life. Even he went down to Malta to pretend to be a knight of Malta, and they tried to kill him. He would end up dying as he was running away from everybody, trying to get to Rome to see if he could get saved or whatever, and ended up dying miserably, like of a fever, out on the beaches of Italy. And they don't even really know where he died or like where his tomb was. They think they've discovered it, but they don't know. Caravaggio, at the end of his life, lived and had this just complete and utter terror. And you can almost imagine him knowing that. And so he paints himself into this painting. If you look at the right hand of Jesus, about where the elbow would be, there's a man, you can see his nose, you can see the reflection of his right cheek. And it's hard to see this with what we're saying, but right underneath it is this man's holding his hands together, he's praying. And anybody who knew Caravaggio knew that he constantly lived in the shadows. He constantly lived in this kind of back and forth between the joy and the despair, the light and the darkness, grace and sin. And so it's as if this is his last painting. It's one of his last paintings, and he paints himself right there. And what is he doing? He's praying. He has his hands held together in prayer. I don't know where any of us are in our life, but to paint ourselves next to Jesus in prayer is a good spot to be. And so in some sense, there's like 3 levels to this that obviously can emerge. The first is the immediate one, which that Jesus obviously was going to be glorified by this raising of Lazarus. And we can hear it in today's gospel that many people came to believe in him. So he was already glorified by doing this action. And you can imagine his face sharing group, what it must have been like to go back to the face sharing group, just the 4 of them. And all of a sudden Lazarus is there telling about what it was like to die and then be risen. I mean, that would be an interesting face sharing moment to go back as he was able to do and be with them. So there's that immediate thing. And then also the recognition that the Jews would then try to kill him for this. So that was obvious. And then you obviously have Holy Week, and then he does get killed. And this was one of the reasons that he would die. But then there's obviously the bigger picture, that death died here. Like, Jesus came to take control of death. Before Jesus came, the devil had control of death. From Adam and Eve, when sin entered, the realm of death was something where human beings would be trapped in. And the devil loves trapping us in the stench and the smelliness of death. And so Jesus, knowing that he's about to kill death, take control of death, where death would just simply be like the Fort Pitt tunnels, that you just go from one side to the next and see the beautiful city of God open up. That so too, with his resurrection, passing through the tomb, would therefore conquer death, and the devil no longer would have control over death. And so no matter what fears we have, like the worst smelly things in our hearts, minds, and souls, no matter how bad tragedies in our lives have hit us, maybe it's a tough marriage, maybe we've lost a loved one, maybe we're struggling with something, maybe it's a job, I don't know. But Jesus tells us, this sickness will end. Not with death having the final word, but God's glory having the final word. And that brings us to the immediate, like here and now. This Holy Week, it's good for us to like almost jump into the stench of the body of Lazarus as it's being resurrected by Jesus, and attach in that all those things that hold us back from being free, from being able to truly speak and feel and hear and allow our hearts to be alive fully in Jesus Christ. What are those stenchy little things, cloths that are holding us back? And the answer to all of that is holding on to the hand of Christ. It's that right hand of Lazarus. It's like this Holy Week, what are we going to do? Continue to grasp for the stench of the tomb like that one hand is, the left hand of Lazarus? Or are we going to be like that right hand and reach out and touch Jesus and let him, during this Holy Week, resurrect us from the smelliness of our sinful and perhaps whatever it is in our hearts we need resurrected. So let's let this painting be a good entranceway into Holy Week. Maybe we need to be like Martha and Mary and hold other people as they're going through this. Maybe we need to be like Caravaggio. We need to just be close to Jesus contemplating. All of us need that light of heaven into the darkness of our hearts.